The heart monitor beeped slower, then slower. Mok Jin-Sang had not slept in 4 days. His $3,000 suit was wrinkled. His hands, the same hands that had signed death warrants on 11 men this year alone, were shaking. His daughter, Hana, 7 years old, lay on the hospital bed like a flower pressed between the pages of a book, flat, pale, barely there. The tubes in her arms carried medicine that wasn't working. The machines around her blinked numbers that meant nothing anymore. Outside the VIP suite, 6 bodyguards stood with weapons concealed under tailored jackets. Inside the room, 3 of the most expensive doctors in the country stood shoulder to shoulder, and not one of them could look Mok in the eye. "Say it," Mok whispered, his voice low and cracked. The lead doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Mok, we've exhausted every known protocol. Her immune system is attacking her own organs. At this rate, she has maybe 72 hours. Mok Jin-Sang, the man who controlled every shipping port in the city, the man whose name made judges go quiet and police look away, dropped to his knees beside his daughter's bed and pressed his forehead against her tiny hand. That's when the door opened. Not slowly, not with a knock. The door swung open the way doors open when someone is lost and frustrated and carrying too many bags. A young black woman stepped in, wearing a bright orange delivery vest, a bike helmet still strapped to her chin, balancing 3 plastic bags of takeout in her arms. "Her name tag," said Karin. Every bodyguard in the room reached for their weapon. "Wrong room, I know. I'm sorry. The guy at the desk said VIP 1 and I—" She stopped. Not because of the guns, not because of the men in black suits. She stopped because of the smell. It was faint, sweet, earthy, like overripe fruit mixed with something metallic. Most people would never notice it, but Karin Daniels noticed it because she had smelled it before. She had smelled it coming from her own body when she was 9 years old and almost died. She set the bags down on the floor. She looked past the bodyguards, past the doctors, straight at the little girl on the bed. Then she looked at Mok. "That smell," Karin said quietly, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "She's not just sick, she's fading. Her body is eating itself from the inside." Mok's head snapped up. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm nobody," Karin said. "I deliver food for a living. But my mother knew what that smell means. And she had a remedy, a soup. Made from roots most doctors have never even heard of." She reached into her personal bag, not the delivery bags, and pulled out a small glass jar filled with golden liquid. It smelled like the earth after rain. "This was my lunch," Karin said. "But your daughter needs it more than I do." One of the bodyguards stepped forward. "Boss, she's crazy. Let me remove her." But Mok didn't move. He stared at Karin. He stared at the jar. He looked at his daughter's face, gray, sunken, slipping away from him one breath at a time. "How do you know what she has?" Mok asked. "Because I had it," Karin said. "When I was a child, the doctors gave up on me too. My mother didn't. She boiled roots for 21 days straight. She fed me this exact soup, 1 spoon at a time. And I'm standing here, aren't I?" The room went dead silent. The monitors beeped. Hana's breathing was so shallow you could barely see her chest rise. Mok stood up slowly. He walked toward Karin until they were face to face. She was a full head shorter than him. She didn't step back. He reached inside his jacket. Every guard tensed, but instead of pulling a gun, he pulled his hand away empty. "If she dies," Mok said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you die." Karin didn't blink. "If she lives," Mok continued, "I'll give you the world." Karin looked at the little girl on the bed. She thought about her own mother dead now, buried in a cemetery she couldn't afford to visit. She thought about all the years her mother's knowledge was laughed at, dismissed, called backward. She unscrewed the jar. "I don't want the world," Karin said. "I just need a spoon. If you want to know whether Hana survives, if you want to know why this delivery was never really an accident, if you want to know what Mok Jin-Sang does when his entire empire threatens to destroy the one woman trying to save his child, subscribe to see how this unfolds. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. Now, let me take you back to where this impossible story really began. 3 weeks before the delivery girl walked into his life, Mok Jin-Sang sat at the head of a mahogany table on the 44th floor of a building he owned but whose name wasn't on any paper. 14 men sat around that table. Each one controlled a different piece of the city: the ports, the gambling dens, the construction contracts, the nightclubs that never closed, and every single one of them answered to Mok. He was 41 years old. He had built the Golden Dragon Syndicate from a street crew of 5 into an empire that moved more money in a week than most corporations moved in a quarter. Police commissioners called him Sir. Politicians sent him gift baskets on New Year's. He had a penthouse with bulletproof windows, a fleet of armored cars, and a private doctor on retainer who made house calls at 3 a.m. But none of that mattered now, because 4 floors below the most advanced intensive care unit in the country, his 7-year-old daughter was dying, and every piece of power he had accumulated over 20 years was worth exactly nothing. Hana had started getting sick 8 months ago. At first, it was just fatigue. Then the fevers came. Then the bruises that appeared without reason, purple and black, spreading across her arms like ink stains on paper. The first doctor said it was anemia. The second said it was a virus. The third, a specialist flown in from Seoul, ran tests for 3 days and came back with a name nobody could pronounce and a prognosis nobody wanted to hear. Autoimmune. Her body was turning on itself. Her immune system, the thing designed to protect her, had become her executioner. It was attacking her kidneys, her liver, her blood. Slowly, methodically, like a fire burning a house from the inside out. Mok had thrown money at the problem the way he threw money at every problem. He flew in doctors from Germany, Japan, the United States. He paid for experimental treatments that weren't even approved yet. He bought an entire floor of the hospital so Hana could have privacy, and the best nurses money could buy. He threatened. He bribed. He begged. Nothing worked, and now he was sitting in a plastic chair beside her bed at 2 a.m., watching her chest rise and fall in a rhythm that got weaker every night. The monitors beeped their steady mechanical lullaby. The IV dripped. The room smelled like antiseptic and something else, something sweet and faintly rotten that the nurses pretended not to notice. Mok noticed. He held her hand. It was so small inside his, so light, like holding a bird that had forgotten how to fly. "Appa," Hana whispered without opening her eyes. "Daddy." "I'm here," Mok said. His voice broke on the second word, and he hated himself for it. He had not cried since he was 14 years old. He had watched men die. He had given orders that ended families. But this tiny girl with the oxygen tube taped to her nose and the dark circles under her eyes, this was the thing that broke him. The doctors came the next morning. 3 of them, standing in a row like soldiers delivering bad news to a general. They wouldn't sit down. That was the first sign. "Mr. Mok," the lead physician said, "we've tried every available protocol. Immunosuppressants, plasma exchange, the experimental biologics from the Frankfurt trial. Her body is rejecting everything. Her kidney function has dropped to 19%. Her liver enzymes are—" "Skip the numbers," Mok said. "Tell me what happens next." The doctor swallowed. "Without a miracle, Mr. Mok, we're talking about days, not weeks." The other 2 doctors looked at the floor. One of them had tears in his eyes. Even they had grown attached to the little girl who drew pictures of dragons on her napkins and shared her pudding cups with the night nurses. Mok said nothing. He stared at the wall behind them, a wall he could have ripped apart with his bare hands if it would have changed anything. Then he turned back to his daughter, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and kissed her forehead. The doctors left quietly, like men leaving a funeral that hadn't happened yet. The food order came in at 11:47 a.m. Karin Daniels saw it pop up on her phone screen while she was sitting on her bike outside a fried chicken spot in the funeral. Rain, waiting for an order that was already 12 minutes late. 36 containers, 8 soups, 4 trays of grilled meat, Delivery to Seoul Metropolitan General Hospital, VIP wing. The tip alone was more than she usually made in a day. She almost didn't take it. The hospital was across town, and her bike chain had been slipping all morning. But rent was due in 3 days, and she was $400 short, and the landlord had already left 2 notes on her door that weren't friendly, so she took it. Karin was 26. She had come to this city 2 years ago with a suitcase, a culinary degree she couldn't afford to use, and the stubbornness her mother always said would either save her or kill her. She worked 3 gig apps. She delivered food, groceries, and packages, sometimes all in the same hour. She ate 1 real meal a day, usually the soup she made herself every Sunday night from a recipe her mother had taught her, a golden broth made from roots and bark and dried flowers. Her mother called it the soup that remembers, because it was made from memory, passed down through 5 generations of women who healed with their hands. Karin carried a jar of it everywhere. It was her lunch, her comfort, her connection to a woman who had died 2 years ago in a hospital that smelled nothing like this one. She arrived at Seoul Metropolitan General soaking wet, helmet fogged, bags stacked in the oversized carrier strapped to her back. The security guard at the VIP entrance looked at her like she was a stain on the marble floor. "Delivery for the VIP wing," Karin said, holding up her phone. "Leave it at the desk. The app says hand deliver. Room VIP 1. The guard made a call. Someone on the other end said something. The guard waved her through with a look that said he wasn't happy about it. The VIP wing didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a hotel designed by someone who had never been sick a day in their life. Marble floors, recessed lighting, doors that didn't have numbers, they had names. She passed a lounge with a grand piano. She passed a waiting area with fresh orchids on every table. She also passed 6 men in black suits who watched her the way wolves watch a rabbit crossing an open field. The hallway split, left or right, no signs. No one at the nurse's station. She went left. Wrong choice. The door at the end of the hall was heavy, dark wood, with a small electronic keypad. But it was cracked open, propped by a medical cart someone had forgotten to move. Karin pushed through it with her shoulder, bags swinging, and stepped inside. The room was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh flowers, a couch that cost more than her apartment. And in the center, in a bed that looked like it was made for a grown man, lay the smallest, most fragile-looking child Karin had ever seen. A man sat beside the bed. He was tall, lean, wearing a suit that fit him like armor. His face was carved from stone-sharp jaw, dark eyes, a scar that ran from his left ear to his collar. But his eyes were red. His posture was bent. He looked like a building about to collapse. 3 more men stood against the walls. Their jackets bulged in places jackets shouldn't bulge. "Wrong room, I know, I'm sorry." The guy at the desk said VIP 1 and then she smelled it. It hit her like a memory she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it was there. Sweet, earthy, faintly metallic, like old pennies left in wet soil. It was the smell of a body surrendering, the smell of organs shutting down one by one, releasing their chemistry into the breath. She knew that smell. She had breathed that smell out of her own lungs when she was 9 years old, and her mother sat beside her bed for 21 days, spooning golden broth past her cracked lips, refusing to let the doctors take her daughter away. Karin set the bags down. She wasn't thinking about the delivery anymore. She wasn't thinking about the tip. She was thinking about her mother's hands, steady and warm, lifting her head to drink. "That smell," Karin said, looking straight at the man in the suit. "She's not just sick. She's fading. Her body is eating itself from the inside." Every guard in the room reached for their weapon. The man in the suit stood up slowly, and even in his grief, the motion carried the weight of someone who was used to being the most dangerous person in any room. "Who are you?" he said. Not loud. Worse than loud. Quiet. "Nobody," Karin said. "I deliver food. But my mother, she knew what this is. She had a remedy." Karin reached into her personal bag, passed her phone and her wallet and a crumpled pack of tissues, and pulled out the glass jar. The soup inside was golden, almost glowing under the hospital's fluorescent lights. It smelled like rain-soaked earth and something older, something that had no name in any modern pharmacy. "This was my lunch," she said. "But your daughter needs it more than I do." The bodyguard they called Sergeant, a man with a neck thicker than Karen's thigh, stepped forward and took the jar from her hand. He unscrewed it, sniffed it, and looked at Mok. "Could be anything," Sergeant said. "Poison, a sedative. We should have it tested." "Testing takes 48 hours, Karin said quietly. "Your daughter doesn't have 48 hours. Mok looked at her, really looked at her. She was soaking wet. Her orange vest had a tear in the shoulder. Her sneakers were held together with duct tape on one side. She had nothing, no credentials, no authority, no reason to be in this room. And she was standing in front of 4 armed men, not shaking, not backing down, telling a crime lord what his daughter needed. "How do you know what she has?" Mok asked. "Because I had it. When I was a child, doctors couldn't help me either. My mother boiled roots for 21 days. She fed me 1 spoon at a time. And I'm standing right here." The room held its breath. The heart monitor beeped. Hana's fingers twitched on the white sheet. Mok walked to the bed. He looked at his daughter's face, the gray skin, the cracked lips, the hollowed cheeks that used to be round with laughter. He thought about the doctors and their useless degrees. He thought about the treatments that cost more than houses and did less than nothing. He thought about 72 hours. Then he looked back at Karin. "If she dies, you die." Karen's heart hammered, but her face stayed still. She nodded once. "If she lives, I give you the world. I don't want the world. I just need a spoon." Sergeant handed her one from the meal tray. Stainless steel, cold. Karin took it, sat on the edge of the bed gently, so gently, and dipped the spoon into the golden soup. Steam curled up like a prayer. The bodyguards didn't lower their guns. 3 barrels pointed at the back of Karin's head as she lifted Hana's chin with one hand and brought the spoon to her lips with the other. "Come on, baby girl," Karin whispered. "Just 1 sip. That's all I need from you." Hana's lips parted. The soup touched her tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Karin held her breath. Mok gripped the bed rail so hard his knuckles turned white. Then Hana swallowed, and she didn't vomit. For the first time in 3 weeks, 3 weeks of every liquid, every medicine, every nutrient being rejected by her body within minutes, she swallowed and kept it down. Karin fed her a 2nd spoon, then a 3rd. Hana's eyes fluttered but didn't open. A tiny bit of color, barely enough to notice, but Mok noticed crept back into her lips. "Again," Mok said. His voice was hoarse. "Give her more." "No," Karin said firmly. 3 spoons. That's enough for now. Too much too fast and her stomach will reject it. We go slow. 1 dose every 4 hours. Mok stared at her. Nobody told Mok Jin-Sang no. Not his men. Not his lawyers. Not the judges he owned. But this woman, this delivery girl in a torn vest, had just told him no. And something in her voice made him listen. He sat back down. 4 hours, he repeated. 4 hours, Karin confirmed. She placed the jar on the bedside table, stood up, and reached for her delivery bags. She still had 29 containers of food to drop off to whoever had actually ordered them. "Where do you think you're going?" Mok said. "I have a job. I'll come back tonight with more." "You're not leaving this room." By midnight, Karin Daniels' life as she knew it was over. Mok made 3 phone calls. The first was to her delivery app company within the hour. Her account was deactivated, not by suspension, but by a corporate decision that came from so high up nobody questioned it. The second call was to a man named Park, who handled finances. By morning, every debt Karin had: the credit cards, the medical bills from her mother's funeral, the 2 months of back rent was paid in full, not reduced, eliminated, as if they'd never existed. The third call was to Sergeant. She doesn't leave. She doesn't make calls without clearance. She gets whatever she needs: food, clothes, equipment. But she stays. Karin sat on the couch in the VIP suite, eating cold rice from one of the delivery containers, watching this man rearrange her entire existence with the casual efficiency of someone ordering furniture. "You can't just kidnap me," Karin said. Mok looked at her. "Your rent is paid for a year. Your debts are gone. And my daughter swallowed food for the first time in 3 weeks. I'm not kidnapping you. I'm hiring you. I didn't agree to this. You agreed when you sat on that bed and picked up the spoon." Karin wanted to argue. She wanted to call the police, call a lawyer, call someone. But then she looked at Hana, still sleeping, still fragile, but breathing just a fraction deeper than she had been 6 hours ago, and she thought about her mother. Her mother, who had stayed at Karin's bedside for 21 days and never once left. Not for work, not for rest, not for anything. "I need my things," Karin said quietly. "From my apartment, and I need to go to the Korean market on 32nd Street. There are ingredients I can't get anywhere else." Mok nodded. "Sergeant will take you. You have 1 hour. I need 3. 2. Fine." And just like that, Karin Daniels, a woman who had been invisible to the world 12 hours ago, became the most important person in the life of the most dangerous man in the city. The penthouse suite at Seoul Metropolitan General was designed for royalty, or at least for the kind of people who believed money made them. Royal, white walls, chrome fixtures, a flat screen mounted on an adjustable arm, temperature-controlled air that smelled like absolutely nothing. Karin hated it immediately. She arrived the next morning with 2 duffel bags, a cardboard box, and a look on her face that said she had already made peace with whatever was about to happen. Sergeant carried the bags. He set them on the marble floor like they were radioactive. Karin unzipped the first bag and began unpacking. Out came a wooden cutting board, darkened with years of use. A set of ceramic bowls with hairline cracks running through them like tiny rivers. A mortar and pestle made of volcanic stone, heavy enough to use as a weapon. Dried roots in paper bags, each one labeled in her mother's handwriting, faded ink on tape that was starting to peel. Bundles of dried herbs tied with kitchen twine. A small glass bottle of dark oil that smelled like pine needles and black pepper. She laid everything out on the hospital's gleaming steel counter like a surgeon setting up instruments. Sergeant stared. "What is all that?" "Medicine," Karin said. "It looks like dirt and sticks. Most medicine does. Before someone puts it in a pill and charges you $400 for it." Mok walked in 20 minutes later, fresh from a meeting that had involved shouting, threats, and the renegotiation of a port contract worth $11 million. He stopped in the doorway of the suite's kitchenette and stared. The counter was covered, roots soaking in ceramic bowls, herbs drying on paper towels, the mortar and pestle grinding something that smelled sharp and green. Karin stood in the middle of it all, her sleeves rolled up, her hands stained brown from the roots, humming a melody he didn't recognize. The chrome coffee machine had been pushed to the corner. The electric kettle had been unplugged to make room for a small clay pot she'd placed on a portable gas burner she had apparently brought from home. "What happened to my kitchen?" Mok said. "It's not your kitchen anymore," Karin said without looking up. "It's a pharmacy. It smells like a forest." "Good. Forests heal. Hospitals just manage." Mok opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He watched her work. Her hands moved with a certainty he recognized, the same certainty he saw in his best men when they assembled weapons or counted money. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't experimenting. She was following a map that had been drawn long before she was born. "Where did you learn this?" Mok asked. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his jacket hanging open just enough to show the holster underneath. "My mother," Karin said. "And her mother before that. 5 generations. The women in my family were healers. Back home, people came to my grandmother's house from 3 villages away when their children were sick. No appointment, no insurance. Just a knock on the door and a prayer." "And it worked?" Karin looked at him. "I'm standing here, aren't I?" The first full day was strange for both of them. Mok was a man whose world ran on precision-timed meetings, encrypted phone calls, motorcades that moved like clockwork. Karin's world ran on intuition, tasting the broth, feeling the texture of a root between her fingers, waiting for the soup to turn the exact shade of gold that meant it was ready. He wanted updates every hour. She told him healing doesn't work on a schedule. He wanted to know the exact ingredients, the exact measurements, the exact science. She told him there was no science. There was memory. There was trust. There was 5 generations of women watching their children die and refusing to accept it. He hated not being in control. She hated being watched. But they had one thing in common, and it was the thing that kept them from destroying each other. They were both completely, desperately alone. Mok had an empire, but he had no friends. His wife had died giving birth to Hana. His lieutenants feared him. His rivals wanted him dead. The only person on earth who loved him without conditions was the 7-year-old girl in the next room, and she was slipping away. Karin had freedom, but she had no one. Her mother was dead. Her father had left before she could remember his face. She had no siblings, no partner, no community in this city. She had a 1-room apartment with a leaking ceiling and a jar of soup that reminded her she once belonged to something. On the second night, Mok found Karin asleep on the couch with her hand resting on the clay pot, keeping it warm. He pulled a blanket from the closet, the same blanket his men used when they pulled overnight shifts in the suite, and draped it over her shoulders. He didn't know why he did it. He told himself it was practical. She was keeping his daughter alive. She needed to stay warm. But the truth he would never say out loud, was simpler than that. It had been a very long time since someone in his world had fallen asleep without being afraid. On the 3rd morning, Hana opened her eyes. Not all the way, just a flutter. Just enough to see the room, to see her father sitting in his usual chair, and to see the strange woman in the kitchen stirring something that smelled like the earth after a long rain. "Appa," Hana whispered. "Who is that lady?" Mok looked at Karin. Karin looked at Hana. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, something in the room felt like it was beginning instead of ending. "That," Mok said softly, "is the woman who is saving your life." Hana blinked. Then, in a voice so small it barely moved the air, she said, "She smells like outside." Karin laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in that room. It echoed off the white walls and chrome surfaces like a sound that didn't belong there, and that was exactly why it mattered. "Yeah, baby girl," Karin said, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. "I do. And pretty soon, you're going to smell like outside too. If you want to know what happens when the hospital tries to shut Karin down, when Mok is forced to move his dying daughter to the most dangerous part of the city, and when the walls start closing in from every direction. If you're hooked on Mok Jin-Sang and Karin Daniels' impossible story, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell because the next chapter is going to be insane. Comment below, Team Karin or Team Mok. Don't miss what happens next. Their worlds are about to collide again in ways neither of them saw coming. Now, let me take you to what happened next. It was the hospital administrator who broke first. His name was Director Yoon, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a signature that appeared on every compliance form in the building. For 5 days, he had looked the other way. He had ignored the reports from the nursing staff about unauthorized substances being administered in the VIP suite. He had pretended not to notice the armed men in the hallways, the strange smells coming from under the door, the delivery girl who had somehow become a permanent resident of his most expensive room. But on the 6th morning, a nurse filed a formal complaint, and an hour after that, the hospital's legal counsel called, and an hour after that, Director Yoon was standing outside room VIP 1 with 2 police officers and a document that used words like cease, unlicensed, and criminal liability. Mok met them at the door. He didn't open it all the way. He filled the gap with his body the way a wall fills a doorway. "Mr. Mok," Director Yoon said, his voice tight with the courage of a man hiding behind a badge that wasn't his. "We've been more than accommodating. But administering unregulated substances to a minor in this facility is a violation of at least 4 statutes. The police are here to ensure the treatment stops immediately. And what? Mok said. The 2 officers shifted. They knew who Mok Jin-Sang was. Everyone in this city knew. One of them had his hand near his radio. The other had his hand near his holster. Neither wanted to be the first to move. And the woman performing the treatment must leave the premises. Director Yoon finished, swallowing hard. Behind Mok, inside the room, Karin was feeding Hana her evening dose. The girl's color had improved. Her eyes were open more often now. She had asked for a drawing pad that morning. These were small miracles, invisible to anyone reading a compliance form. Mok looked at the police officers. He could make this go away. 1 phone call to the right commissioner, 1 envelope passed to the right judge, and Director Yoon would find himself transferred to a rural clinic checking blood pressure on farmers. But that would take time. It would draw attention. And right now, attention was the one thing Mok couldn't afford. Because the Golden Dragon Syndicate was watching, his lieutenants were asking questions. Where is the boss? Why is he living in a hospital? Why did he cancel 3 meetings this week? And worse, the other syndicates were listening. In Mok's world, absence was blood in the water. He couldn't fight the cops here. Not with Hana in the next room, hooked to a monitor, finally getting better. A single wrong move, a struggle, a raised voice, and they'd have grounds to take her. Put her in state custody. Hand her back to the doctors who had already given up. Mok closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, a decision had been made. We'll be out by morning, he said. Director Yoon blinked, clearly expecting a fight. By morning. Yes, that would be acceptable. Mok closed the door in his face. He turned to Karin. She was standing by the bed, the spoon still in her hand, Hana's golden broth cooling on the tray. She had heard everything. Where? Karin asked. Mok looked at her apartment address on the ID badge she still wore clipped to her bag. The bad part of town. Cracked walls, leaking pipes. A neighborhood where police didn't patrol because there was nothing worth protecting. It was the last place anyone would look for the head of the Golden Dragon. Your place, Mok said. Karin almost laughed. My apartment is 400 square feet. The elevator hasn't worked in 2 years. My neighbor sells bootleg electronics out of his living room. Is it safe? From who? Hospital administrators? Yes. From everything else? Debatable. Then it's perfect. They moved that night. Sergeant drove. No motorcade, no escort, just a single black sedan with tinted windows weaving through streets that got narrower and darker with every turn. Mok carried Hana himself, wrapped in a blanket, her head against his shoulder. She weighed almost nothing. Under his jacket, pressed against his ribs, was a pistol and 2 extra magazines. He had not gone anywhere unarmed since he was 19 years old, and he wasn't about to start now. Karin's apartment was exactly as she'd described. Small, cluttered, alive. Every surface held something: books stacked on the windowsill, dried herbs hanging from a cord above the kitchen sink, her mother's old clay pot sitting on the counter like an altarpiece. The walls were thin enough to hear the television next door. The radiator clanked like a tired heartbeat. But it smelled like earth and roots and something green and growing. And when Mok laid Hana on the narrow bed in the corner, the girl took a deep breath and, for the first time in weeks, smiled in her sleep. Mok stood in the center of the tiny apartment, his tailored suit absurdly out of place among the mismatched furniture and hanging laundry, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. They were here now. This was the battlefield. Karin ran out of the route on the 9th day. She had been stretching the supply, grinding it thinner, diluting the broth just slightly to make it last. But that morning, she reached into the paper bag labeled in her mother's handwriting, the one that said Sanghwa in faded ink, and found only dust. Her hands went still. She stared at the empty bag the way a soldier stares at an empty magazine. "What's wrong?" Mok asked from the doorway. He had learned to read her silences the way he once read the silence before a deal went bad. The root. The main one. "I'm out. So we buy more." Karin shook her head. You can't buy this. It doesn't grow in farms or greenhouses. It's wild. It grows in old soil that hasn't been touched by chemicals or construction for decades. My mother used to harvest it from a patch of land in the Mapo district, near the old river. There's an abandoned neighborhood there, old houses, old gardens. The roots grow between the foundations. Mok's face changed. It was subtle, a tightening around the jaw, a flicker in the eyes, but Karin saw it. What? She said. The Mapo district, Mok said slowly. The old neighborhood by the river. Yes. Do you know it? Mok knew it. He knew it because his men were there right now. 12 of them, with bulldozers and diesel and demolition permits that had been bought from a city official who owed Mok a debt he could never repay. They were clearing the land for a casino, the biggest project the Golden Dragon had ever attempted. A $200 million development that would cement Mok's legacy as the most powerful man in the city. And buried in the soil beneath those crumbling houses, between the cracked foundations and the wild, untended gardens, grew the only thing on earth that could save his daughter's life. Mok pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. One call to stop the demolition would cost him the casino deal. It would cost him credibility with his investors, his partners, his men. It would cost him millions. It would make him look weak. He looked at Hana, asleep on Karin's bed with a coloring book resting on her chest. He made the call. Stop the demolition, Mok said into the phone. No explanation, no negotiation. Pull the men out. Now, nothing gets touched. The voice on the other end, his project manager, stammered. Boss, the crews are already on site. We've got contracts. I said stop. Silence. Then, yes, sir. Mok hung up and looked at Karin. The routes are safe. Go get what you need. Sergeant will drive you. Karin studied his face. She didn't know the details, but she knew what it looked like when a man destroyed something he'd built. She'd seen it in the mirror enough times. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Just save my daughter. Mok's second in command was a man named J1. He had been with the Golden Dragon for 15 years. He had killed for Mok. He had bled for Mok. He had watched Mok build an empire from nothing, and he had always believed that empire was built on one principle: never show weakness. The demolition order was the first crack. Stopping a $200 million project for no stated reason that was not the Mok Jin-Sang that Jae-won knew. Then came the disappearance from the penthouse, the cancelled meetings, the rumors that the boss was hiding in some apartment on the south side of the city, nursing his sick daughter with the help of a delivery girl and a pot of soup. Jae-won sat in his car outside the Mapo construction site, watching the bulldozers sit idle, and made a decision that would change everything. He picked up a burner phone. He dialed a number he had memorized but never used. It rang twice. This is Jae-won, he said. I have something the White Tiger clan wants to hear. The voice on the other end was calm, almost amused. We're listening. Mok Jin-Sang is hiding. No guards, no crew, just him, a girl, and his dying kid in a walk-up apartment on the south side. I'll send you the address. And what do you want in return? Jae-won looked at the idle bulldozers. I want the casino deal, and I want to be the one sitting in his chair when this is over. He hung up. He didn't feel guilty. In their world, loyalty was a currency, and Mok had just devalued it. They came at 3 a.m. 22 men, black vans, no headlights. They moved through the dark streets of the south side like a sickness spreading through a body, quiet and deliberate. The White Tiger clan had waited years for a moment like this. Mok Jin-Sang, alone, unguarded, emotional, weak. But they weren't coming for Mok, not primarily. They were coming for Karin. The White Tiger clan had learned about the golden soup. Their intelligence was thorough. They had tested a sample stolen from the hospital's waste disposal, and what they found made their fighters' eyes go wide. The root combination wasn't just a healing remedy, it was a performance enhancer. Reflexes, endurance, pain tolerance. The soup that could save a dying girl could also build an army. They didn't want to kill the delivery girl. They wanted to own her. Mok heard them before he saw them. The sound of boots on wet concrete, the click of a van door sliding open. He was standing by the kitchen window, drinking cold tea in the dark, because sleep had stopped being something he did. He looked down. Black figures moving across the parking lot. Too many, too organized, not police. His blood went cold, then hot. "Karin," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Wake up. Take Hana into the bathroom. Lock the door. Do not come out." Karin was off the couch in a second. She didn't ask questions. She scooped Hana from the bed, the girl stirring, mumbling, confused, and carried her into the bathroom. She locked the door, then shoved the heavy ceramic hamper against it. Then she went back to the kitchen. The final dose of the remedy was simmering on the stove. 2 more hours. Hana needed this dose. Without it, everything they had done, every root, every spoon, every sleepless night would unravel. She was not leaving the kitchen. Mok checked his weapon. 1 pistol, 2 extra magazines. Against 22 men with automatic weapons and body armor, it was almost funny. Almost. Sergeant was across the city. Mok had sent him to the Mapo district that afternoon to guard the root harvest, because the roots mattered more than muscle right now. That decision might cost him his life tonight. He stepped into the hallway of the apartment building. The lights flickered overhead, half the bulbs were dead anyway. The stairwell door at the far end was already being forced open. He could hear the metal groaning. Mok Jin-Sang rolled his neck. He adjusted his cuffs. He was still wearing his suit, wrinkled now, stained at the collar with broth and sweat, but still his armor. And then they came through the door. The hallway became a war, close quarters. No room to maneuver. Exactly the kind of fight Mok had been training for since he was 16 years old in a basement gym, learning to survive with his hands when the bullets ran out. The first man through the door took a round to the chest and dropped. The second fired wide, shattering a light fixture. Mok moved forward, not back, never back, and met the third at arm's length. Elbow to the jaw, knee to the ribs. The gun clattered to the floor. They kept coming. 4, 5, 6. The hallway was narrow enough that they couldn't all come at once, and Mok used that like a weapon, funneling them, making them stumble over their own fallen. His suit tore at the shoulder. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. A bullet grazed his hip, and the pain was white and electric, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Behind him, in a tiny kitchen in a cheap apartment, a woman was keeping his daughter alive, 1 spoon at a time, and he would hold this hallway until his body physically refused to stand. 7, 8, 9. His hands were slick. His breathing was ragged. The floor was dark with things he didn't want to look at. Inside the apartment, Karin heard everything. The gunshots, the shouting, the sounds of bodies hitting walls. She stood over the stove, stirring the soup with shaking hands, watching the color deepen from amber to gold. Almost ready. Not yet. The apartment door burst open. A man, massive, armored, carrying a weapon that looked like it belonged on a vehicle, stepped into the kitchen. He saw Karin. He saw the soup. He grinned. "The cook," he said. "You're coming with us." Karin didn't think. She grabbed the pot from the burner with both hands. The handles were wrapped in cloth. Her mother had always taught her to wrap the handles and threw the boiling liquid directly into the man's face. He screamed. The sound was inhuman. He dropped his weapon and clawed at his skin, stumbling backward into the doorframe. Karin grabbed the fallen weapon. It was heavier than anything she'd ever held, and swung it like a bat into his kneecap. He went down. She slammed the door, locked it, pushed the refrigerator against it with a strength she didn't know she had. Then she went to the stove. There was still soup in the second pot, the backup batch she had started that afternoon, just in case. She ladled it into a bowl, carried it to the bathroom, and knocked on the door. "Hana, baby girl, open up. It's me." The lock clicked. Hana stood in the doorway, wide awake, her eyes huge and frightened but alert, fully alert. For the first time in weeks, the gray was gone from her skin. Her cheeks had color. Her hands were steady. "What's happening?" Hana whispered. "Your daddy is keeping us safe," Karin said. "And you need to drink this." Hana took the bowl in both hands and drank. In the hallway, Mok Jin-Sang heard something he hadn't heard in weeks, his daughter's voice. Clear, strong, alive. He stood in the wreckage of the corridor, bleeding from 4 places, surrounded by fallen men, and smiled. Sirens. Blue and red lights strobing through the stairwell windows. The police were coming, and this time, Mok couldn't buy his way out. The hallway was a crime scene. He was standing in it. He set his weapon on the floor. He put his hands up. He walked toward the arriving officers slowly, calmly, the way a man walks when he has already decided that what he's walking toward matters less than what he's leaving behind. "My daughter is in apartment 4B, Mok said as they cuffed him. "There's a woman with her. Karin Daniels. She's not a criminal. She's a healer. Don't touch her. Don't touch the girl." He said it with the voice of a man who still owned the city, and the officers, despite themselves, listened. 14 months later, the sun hit the Mapo district differently. Where bulldozers had idled and demolition permits had gathered dust, there was now a garden, not a small one. It stretched across 3 lots of the old neighborhood, a rolling patchwork of raised beds and wild growth, herbs and roots and flowers that had been growing in that soil for longer than anyone could remember. At the center of the garden stood a small building, nothing fancy, cinder block and painted wood, with a hand-lettered sign above the door that read, "The Golden Root Community Clinic." Inside, the shelves were lined with glass jars. The air smelled like earth after rain. Women from the neighborhood came with their children, and Karin Daniels, no longer a delivery girl, no longer invisible, met them at the door with a wooden bowl and a steady hand. The clinic had been open for 6 months. It was funded, quietly, by money that had been laundered clean through a legal foundation Mok's lawyers had set up before the trial. It operated on donations now, and on the reputation of the woman who ran it. Hana was 9. She ran through the garden after school every day, with dirt under her fingernails and a laugh that could be heard from the street. She knew every plant by name. She helped Karin sort the roots on Saturday mornings, and she told every patient who came through the door, with the absolute certainty of a child, that the soup would fix them. She was healthy. Fully, completely, impossibly healthy. The doctors who had given her 72 hours now wrote about her case in medical journals, using careful language that avoided the word miracle but meant it. Mok Jin-Sang served 11 months. His lawyers, who were very expensive and very good, reduced the charges and shortened the sentence. The Golden Dragon Syndicate dissolved in his absence not with a war, but with a quiet dispersal, men drifting to other organizations or, in some cases, to honest work. J1 disappeared. Some said he fled the country. Some said the White Tiger Clan dealt with him when they realized the information he'd sold them led to a massacre and a failed kidnapping. Mok walked out of the prison on a Tuesday morning in October. No motorcade. No entourage. Just a man in plain clothes, carrying a paper bag with his belongings, squinting at the sunlight like he was seeing it for the first time. Sergeant picked him up, drove him to the Mapo district. Didn't say a word the entire ride. When Mok stepped out of the car, he stood still for a long time. He looked at the garden. He looked at the clinic. He looked at the sign with its hand-painted letters. He looked at the soil where his casino was supposed to be. Then the door opened, and Hana came running out. "Appa!" She hit him at full speed, arms around his waist, face pressed against his stomach. He dropped to his knees and held her so tight the world went blurry. Karin stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel, a small smile on her face. She didn't run to him. She didn't need to. She just stood there, in the place she had built, and let him see what his sacrifice had made possible. Mok stood up. He looked at Karin. He looked at the garden. He took off his jacket. He folded it once and set it on the bench by the door. Then he rolled up his sleeves, walked to where Karin was standing, and said the 4 words he had never said in his entire life to anyone who wasn't his daughter. "Tell me what to do." Karin handed him a pair of gardening gloves and pointed to a row of freshly turned earth. "Start there," she said. "The roots need planting before the rain comes." Mok Jin-Sang, The man who once controlled every port in the city, the man whose name made judges go silent and grown men look away, knelt in the dirt beside his daughter and pushed his hands into the soil. He was no longer the boss. He was no longer the destroyer. He was just a father, learning to grow something. And that is the story of how a dying girl, a delivery woman with her mother's recipe, and a man who thought violence was the answer to everything, found something none of them expected, a reason to begin again. But can Mok Jin-Sang really leave his violent past behind? And what dark secret connects Karin's mother to the very empire that destroyed her family? Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss what happens next. This story is about to get even more twisted. Drop a comment. Do you think Mok and Karin's bond can survive the truth about what he did to her family? Like this video if you're obsessed with this story of redemption, healing, and a love that was never supposed to happen. The next chapter drops soon, and trust me, you are not ready for the truth about why that delivery was never really an accident. See you in the next one, if the Golden Dragon lets them live.